We will now move forward with the next question, beginning with candidate Stewart. Many Levine residents feel there is a lack of transparency and clear communication between our city council and their constituents, and that developers' interests are prioritized above that of residents. How do you plan to balance and ensure fairness between the needs of the developers and your constituents?
That is something that I have done for the last 36 years serving this community. I have brought together persons of all types of persuasions when we have a common goal or a common issue to address, and we have worked out the problem, we've identified the problem, we have worked it out. I have heard from those who are affected by the issue or the matter, and we've done it together. It's not done single-handedly. What you see is what you get. If you see me down at the grocery store 51st and Baseline, that's the way I am tonight. That's the way I'll be if I'm elected to the city council. Transparency and honesty and just being real helps you to connect to people, because I want people to be that way for me. So I would have to, and for those who don't know me, and I'm sure there are plenty of people here who do not know me, but I would certainly try to prove myself to you as one. My grandfather taught me as a child, son, the only thing you have is your word. And I stand by my word, and I believe there will be others who can testify that over the last 36 years, to the best of my ability, certainly I've made mistakes, but to the best of my ability, I have been one who has been transparent, one who has been right there with the people to fight for justice, to fight for what is right, and I pledge to do that. And if I'm not elected, I'm going to continue to do that. That's just who I am.
Thank you, candidate Stewart. Candidate Gallego, please.
My dad's family was in the dairy industry, and I love the agricultural history of Levine. It's something that's very important to us at SRP where I work, and something I'd like to preserve. I've also worked for open space through my work with the Environmental Quality Commission, and I led a group called the League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, which also worked for open space and making sure we do have more natural landscapes. So that's something that will be a priority for me. But I do have areas of District 8 where I want to see more development, especially in downtown. I'd like to see a lot more growth along light rail and that corridor and between downtown and the airport. I think there's great potential there to expand the industries. I want to see Arizona have a more diverse economy, less reliant on development, and more jobs in healthcare, technology, aerospace, more diverse industries, because it's been disappointing to see how much we've all hurt with the downturn in the economy because we were dependent on development. And we do need to make investments now in things like transportation infrastructure, high-speed internet, which we don't have as strong of a network south of the airport in District 8, and those type of developments. So there's a place for development in the core of our city and along the park in South Mountain, in Levine. There's also a lot of places where it's important to preserve the great community and feel we have now.
Thank you. Next, candidate Robinson.
So number one, the freeway must come, but we must make sure that we don't lose the character and charm of Levine. So it's a matter of prioritizing the current zoning and development mechanisms here and not changing those to put in more trucks. I mean, if you drive up 51st Avenue to the freeway, you know that it's almost like playing Frogger, trying not to get run over by one of those trucks. So we need to make sure that our community doesn't turn into more of just a trucking stop. Number two, we need to have an online transparent database at the city so that we can actually look at all of the development issues. I'm the only candidate calling for that database so that we can have public comment and public input from our residents here in Levine into every single development issue that goes on down there at City Hall. That's number two. But number three, we need to map our brownfields and our open spaces. Now, I'm saying mapping them, I'm not saying selling them. But when you map brownfields, and brownfields are contaminated lots, we've got many of them throughout the city because of industry. When you map them, we will know where the problems are and the environmental degradation. We have a much higher rate of asthma here in Levine and South Phoenix in general. If you drive up past Riverwalk development on 51st and Southern, you see sand and gravel. We should not zone any more sand and gravel along the riverbed. And number two, we should also make sure that the Rio Salado Habitat Project extends along the river at some point. We should begin planning for that now. Again, I'm the only candidate calling to protect the funding for those such programs, funding for after-school programs, senior centers, fire and police. But one of the other programs right here in the district is the Rio Salado program. That funding would be cut by the other candidates. I want to make sure that we protect the funding and one day extend that riverbed park all the way down here into Laveen.
Thank you. Candidate Rodriguez?
Well, as it relates to the concern of Laveen residents to commercial development, I think that the number one thing is to talk to people that live in Laveen. A lot of people talk about they're going to change how they do committees and how they do the zoning regulations. I think it's important to talk to the people that actually live here and to simplify the process by which they can actually talk to you. Accessibility to who represents you is vital. You know, we all want to talk about all this development. But, I mean, we also got to talk about you, the citizen, and your property, and your rights as a property owner. And so it's vital that your representative is accessible to you. As these zoning signs go up all over the place about we're going to change the zoning from this to that, you definitely have to get input from the people that live there. Most of the time they just put up a sign, and if you show up, that's great. Nobody will ever go and talk to you. Nobody will ever ask you, hey, do you know what this means for you? And we need to look at how zoning laws are actually put in place and make them more transparent so that you guys, you, the citizens, the people that live here, know exactly how it will impact you. And I think that a lot of times people don't know how it impacts them until it's too late. And buildings are built and there's nothing you can do at that point. You just have to suffer and move away. So I think it's more about outreach to residents, and that's how you temper, you know, the development that's going up with the citizens that live here. It's not through another committee, I guarantee you. It's talking to people.
Thank you, Candidate Rodriguez. And moving on to the next question. And we go back now to Candidate Gallego. We have many disabled residents in Laveen. Recently, I observed a mother in a wheelchair riding in the gravel along Baseline Road and 35th Avenue, pushing a stroller with her feet with a small child riding on the back. What do you know about the American Disabilities Act and the Mayor's Commission on Disability Issues? Candidate Gallego?
I've been involved with transportation issues and accessibility from several different perspectives. I was one of the people who asked the city to redo the way we design streets and to adopt a policy called Complete Streets, where when we design the streets, we think about people who are walking, who are using mobility aids, and not just designing for cars, which is how we've been more focused in Phoenix in the past. I've also led the Inclusion Committee for the Arizona Committee on Service and Volunteerism, which tries to work to make sure that we incorporate people with disabilities in plans across the state of Arizona. So this is an issue of importance to me and something where we have a lot of areas of improvement. My husband served in the Marine Corps, and I've gotten very interested in how we could better serve veterans in our community, because we know so many people who've come home with mobility challenges and aren't being served very well. And I was just at a housing project, or a housing facility that works with veterans in our community in District 8, and they said our veterans are really having a hard time because a lot of them have spinal cord issues where they really can't regulate the heat in their body, and they're going to stores where there's no parking left for people in wheelchairs, and they're having real problems because of the lack of design for people with disabilities. So they've given me a couple solutions that other cities have looked at that would make a lot of sense for Phoenix, and look forward to working on that. But these are issues where I've been involved for a while and before I was running for office, so I will continue to work in these areas.
Thank you. Next up, Candidate Robinson.
Yeah, I think the veteran population is important to talk and speak to. My father was a veteran, and I know that we've got a higher percentage of veterans who live here in the district than in most districts. We also, frankly, just have seniors who have mobility issues and need to be able to get around. So it's about connectivity and transportation. If you can get on a sidewalk, and many of our neighborhoods don't even have them to begin with, then does that connect to a bus stop? And when it does, is there shade for you at that bus stop so that you don't have to bake in the heat? It's hard enough to be in a wheelchair and have all of the other ancillary health issues, but if you don't have shade, then you're talking about a real issue of access. And there also is the issue of discrimination. When I served in the mayor's staff to help elect him, Mayor Stanton, the first thing he asked me to do when he took office was to draft revisions to strengthen our city's anti-discrimination ordinance. We specifically looked at disability rights and disability protections, and I made those revisions, and they're now in law, they're in place. And so you've got to really look at not only the law, but the livability, quality of life issues. We're actually going to be releasing a plan, I believe Thursday. We're working with Jennifer Longden, who's one of my endorsers. She's the former chair of this commission that you spoke of, the Disability Rights Commission here in town. Jennifer and I talk all the time about how these issues are issues you don't often think about. We don't think about the fact that we don't have any people who are disabled in positions of authority in the city, really. So you've got to look at how this helps the average resident, and frankly, how it's also going to help business in our economy, but by making it accessible in all ways to all of our residents.
Thank you. Next, candidate Rodriguez.
Well, I don't disagree with anything that these two folks have said, but I think more importantly, I think I would look at the plan for actually how we spend money and go back and make sure that those areas that are not accessible to people with disabilities get changed to do so. And if there's not a sidewalk that's accessible to people in a wheelchair, then we should go back and fix that. I think we should go and do stuff, quit studying stuff. I'm more of an action guy. I'm a veteran myself, and I have a special place in my heart for all veterans. I just retired 2 years ago. So I understand, what veterans go through. I had a first sergeant who broke his back in 3 places. Thank God he could walk, but not very well. So I understand these kinds of issues, but instead of talking about these things, we should go back and look at the plans and see where there aren't any sidewalks and put some in and make sure they're accessible to people with disability. We should go back through the entire district and figure out where those needs are and actually talk to people and say, where are those needs, and fix them as they relate to municipal and city sidewalks, city accessibility issues. And I think that's the way to attack it. I mean, all these plans are great, and like I said, I don't disagree with them a bit, but we got to start doing stuff instead of talking about stuff. And I think I would look and see where that money is being spent and make it a priority. Make it a priority to provide infrastructure for people with disabilities, and make sure it's there for them to have access to what everybody else has access to, and make sure that it's just and fair for everyone in the city. So that's how I would attack the problem.
Thank you. Candidate Stewart.
What you mentioned in your question about the woman and not being accessible and having to be in the gravel is evidence of what the resident said to me a couple of months ago, that some people in this district, in this area, are being ignored. If that is happening, we cannot ignore that. Over the last few years, we have built and renovated a $9 million campus, and it has been a blessing for us as a church to be able to make our campus handicap accessible so that anyone can get there, can get in the sanctuary, can get into any one of our rooms. So if we had to do that as a private nonprofit institution, certainly the city, who uses our taxes, ought to do that to make sure that anyone who is handicapped has the same accesses that anyone else has. And so I've not served on the committees that some of my other colleagues here have served on, but I know how to identify a problem and how to address it and get something that needs to be done. And so I would be a champion to make sure. There's a scripture that says, as you've done it to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you've done it unto me. we owe that to our brothers and sisters who are listening.
Thank you, Kenneth Stewart.